if we want to just jump right into the questions. First, if you'd like to just introduce yourself and give a little background.
My name is Sarah Sharif, and I'm the founder of Experimental Civics and the founder of Capsule. And the last 6 years, our work has been at the intersection of communities, innovation, and technology. Our three-part model is supporting people, whether that's workforce development, design thinking workshops, other things like that, to hosting hackathon events, which is all about elevating ideas, which is the second part of our model, and how do you ideate, how do you problem scope and really understand problems and do user research. And then the third part is how do you take action? So how do you really start to bring these ideas to life? Because that's the hardest part of,
Mhm.
I think, any project is execution and bringing it to something that actually could be impactful. So that's what I do.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So, what do you consider to be your biggest accomplishment?
Building spaces where people can just play.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
know, there's so much to go that basically goes into that, learning how to make a space for people to play, for them to feel free to fail, basically. I don't think it's very often you hear, okay, you can totally fail and it will be completely safe. I think through hackathon events and even just talking with people, it's really about all the people I work with and empowering them. And I don't know. And on a smaller scale, I'd say my most recent accomplishment has been in gardening. So the
Mm.
last 3 4 months, I've just been trying to gain a green thumb. But I remember when I first started out, I did receive certain negative comments of, oh, plants are really hard, or oh, you don't have the time for this, or you've never had a green thumb in the past. Well, hold on. I've never had an opportunity to do the kind of care and buying plants, potting them, learning about it, learning about the land, the garden, the lawn. And so
Yeah.
I think it's that kind of breaking down the barriers, whether it's with people or different mindsets. It's like we face so many limitations. So my greatest accomplishment, I feel like, is providing spaces where you don't hear those, essentially, that you have a space to just try and fail and keep going. And I will fully admit, kill one palm tree, but it was a very small palm tree, and palms are very hard. But yeah.
Trial and error. Exactly. Freedom to fail. I love
Exactly.
that. You kind of touched upon this, but why did you start Capsule?
So essentially, I was having a conversation with a colleague, Alyssa Turner, in April, and we were just venting, talking about the state of the world right now, going into a very politically charged year next year. And we had talked about all the metrics that are out there currently regarding the climate crisis, from the IPCC saying that 90% of human activities have basically warmed the earth the last 50 years is crazy.
Mhm.
um, and, with my entrepreneur hat on, and it was great that she was kind of challenging me. My instinct is to problem solve. My whole gut reaction was, well, what can I do right now? What can I do in terms of helping solve this? And it was just a moment of pure clarity that I've worked on this stuff the last 6 years, and our methodology and our approach has really been very successful and empowering for a lot of people. And so I was like, well, why not do something that, is even bigger and better, because that's what we need right now. And that was kind of the start of Capsule. Visions don't come with specs, so you have to kind of, again, trial and error. And no trees were harmed in the beginning stages of Capsule. And so it's kind of, I think it was just the passion to problem solve and realizing that I had a solution that could make some kind of impact or difference, and just trying to put myself out there and bring people along for that journey.
So, what is the inspiration inspiration behind the name capsule?
In April, I was just talking to so many different people in my network, and I was having a conversation with a lovely woman, Sarah Shields, and I was just describing to her what I was trying to do. I want it to be this moment in our lives. There's certain events that I think hold tremendous value to people. I
Mhm.
remember my first concert. I remember my first hackathon. I remember my first, particular birthday parties. And so I was describing to her that I wanted this event to be a moment. And especially for me, back in the 2000s, we had the whole millennium, switch over, and everyone was doing these capsules. And in my family, we did one. And I tell you truthfully, I have no idea where this thing is buried, but we did create a millennium capsule. And so we put in all these things, and they're meant to, symbolize our time and what we were doing and the accomplishments of humanity at that moment, for the future. And that's where it all kind of clicked on this call with her. That's what this is. It's a moment of time. This is something we're gifting to future generations. And we don't know who's going to feel the impact of this down the road. Like, I don't know who's going to find our capsule, if anyone ever does. But it's a moment to kind of transcend all of that and just really do something that is very timely and that is very needed right now, but do it in a way, again, that's inspirational, that people will hold, as those first time events. Like, I want that feeling to be felt. It really is a celebration of what we can do when we come together as well.
So cool. I still remember everyone making those sort of capsules at a certain moment. I love the idea. Yes.
Did you make one?
Oh yes, I distinctly remember I'm from a very big family and my parents being all for that idea. They were like, "We're doing it."
I love it.
A question more on you personally, but how do you stay in touch with your heritage?
I'm kind of this very unhinged human being. I have three identities, I would say, that I hold. So I was born in Pakistan, but I didn't really live there. So
Mm,
my childhood was not in that country. So it's very different. And especially my family are very progressive and liberal. And, there's definitely so many great things I had, got to experience in my childhood that was very different,
mhm,
from what I know in that culture experience. And so I'm also British and American. So my
mm,
childhood was spent in the UK, and then a good majority of my adult years have now been in the US. So, it wasn't until very recently that I felt like I really was able to embrace and deeply love all of my cultural identities, and realizing that those components of myself or aspects and experiences I've had in my growth have really actually been strengths, to the fact that I was in Oxford 2 weeks ago. I can fly in, I can have my big English breakfast and my
mm,
crumpets and my tea and just feel right at home. um, to coming back. And I know I stopped in New York, and I'm so happy to be back home, right? Like, it's kind of this weird complex that everywhere is basically home. But it felt so good, because I love New York, and it was great to have just to hear even the American accent. I realized I was just happy. Um, and last year, I did take a trip, to Nepal for about 2.5 months, and so it was a wonderful extended trip just to again embrace my South Asian roots. Again, felt right at home. I was in a country where everyone looked like me, and I absolutely adore the food. But I would say it's also different in the sense that, especially in Nepal, if I spoke, there were different reactions that people had. So it was a very different kind of reverse culture shock where you look like me, but you don't sound like me, and you weren't raised here. So
mhm.
it's been tough to juggle those, but I think the more we talk about it and that there are people like myself who have grown up in different cultures, and how do we really embrace all of our identities versus oppressing one and elevating another, I think those conversations are happening more now. Just stay in touch by traveling, immersing yourself in it, and loving each part.
I love that. Yes. That's definitely kind of how I'm seeing it now, where it's that diversity has to be embraced and not compartmentalized.
Exactly, exactly. And I see it so often where you're right, kind of diminish certain sides and aspects of ourselves. And there's just, I think there's such beauty to different cultures. And that's why I love traveling. So you
Mhm.
just have to love each and honestly play it to its strengths.
What are some of your goals, both for experimental civics and future projects and for yourself?
Okay, well, I will focus on three. I wouldn't say I'm going to frame them in the best way of goals, but one of mine, at least professionally, and I said this a couple years ago, and it's still on my whiteboard at home, and it just always makes me laugh. But I said that I would impact 1 million lives by the age of 35. So I'm turning 30 this year. So I think I'm
Well on
starting
your
that path. Yeah. So there's that one. That came about, I think, with, finding my purpose, which I was, I think 23, and I spent 3 months really kind of searching about, okay, what is it that you want to do? And so that's another goal. My purpose that I found for myself was very much, helping others live fulfilled lives. And so another goal is to make sure that all my projects from now and, for the next 30, 40 years are really aligned with helping people. On another level, it's leaving the world better than you found it, still embracing the fact that you get to be here and experience all of the beauty. So, I at some point definitely want to travel and live in Antarctica. I'm just going to throw that
Mm,
out there. Um,
actualize it. Just put it into the world.
Manifesting, manifesting.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, I would love to go and just experience that very extreme, crazy, beautiful, wild, environment. That's the one thing I'll say is that my last goal is just very much traveling as much as I can and seeing as much as I can, and really falling in love with it so that I can also learn how to protect it, and to bring other people into that same story, and yeah, and leave it hopefully better than we found it.
I love that. It reminds me of I don't know if you ever read the children's book Miss Rumphius, but a woman who everyone she goes riding around on her bike through town. Everyone thinks is crazy because she's throwing like they think they're breadcrumbs, they aren't sure what. And it turns out she's putting flowers everywhere. And then she leaves the town and the spring comes around and her entire goal was just to make it a little more beautiful. It's a very similar ideology.
I'm going to go out and get that book. That is amazing. I love that story. That's exactly it.
It's the simplest things, but like on a lighter
It
question, what is a book you
Yeah.
think that everyone should read?
Whew. Okay. Can I make two suggestions
Of course.
if that's okay? So my first one and serious answer is it's a book called Behave: Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst, by Dr. Robert Sapolsky. And this book, now granted, it's if you're buying it in print, it's certainly something to carry around. But I brought it with me to a trip that I was doing to New York, and I was supposed to be outside checking out the sights, but I got so engrossed in the book, I finished it, I think, within a day and a half, and you know, I think I took cat naps just to kind of keep myself going, but I loved it. And it really talks about everything from kind of basic biology, getting into our behavioral patterns, why we think the way that we do, why we feel love the way that we do, why do we feel anger or it really breaks everything down, and it's an amazing read, and I think it's worth just kind of everybody taking a look at that because it really helps you understand why you react certain ways. And I feel that
Mm.
if we understood ourselves better and understood why, what our biology really is and the chemical interactions that are happening, we can be more mindful. But the second is just, it comes from a very artistic side, but it's poetry. I think that, poetry can be so simple, from very short haikus to very long kind of prose and other different long forms. I have always found poetry to be very uplifting for me. To your point about even this children's book, right? It's so simple, it's so delicate, but at the same time, just holds so much value into, how we want the world to be and how do we, we need more folks on bicycles planting seeds, but it's I think poetry captures that. And I just think it's a very cool way of expressing how we feel, whether it's spoken word to written. Um, I'd love for folks to embrace the poets.
Mm. Me as well, I'm with you. What, in your opinion, is the biggest problem facing Asian women today? Especially from the point of view of someone who's an entrepreneur, of someone who's a leader.
Very loaded question, but I'm so happy that you asked it. I I would say that the biggest barrier, from at least my perspective, is really having role models. Quick story, being in an airport. It was very early in the morning. I think it was one of those 6 a.m., 7 a.m. flights.
Oof.
So I was there buying water and looking at the newsstand, and I had never read Entrepreneur. I think the main reason why I was so attracted to that magazine that day was on the front cover was Layla Jinnah, who is the founder of Samasaurus. She's done amazing things as a social entrepreneur. I was just captivated. I had never seen a woman that looked like me on the cover of a business magazine. I think that's the big reason why I started reading Entrepreneur and why I bought that issue. I remember reading it and, Instagramming it and stuff in the morning because I read the article on her and it was amazing. And for the first time, way back then, this was, I would say about 6 years ago, I think 5 years ago, I was like, oh, I could do that. That's an option. I never thought of that before. And so I think it's, when we have role models like that and, truly women, I would say, when I say role model, I really mean women that are authentic, that are real, that I could actually identify with, and who are actual leaders that you would want to emulate, and I've always really respected her, and I've seen it with like Leela Singh, who's a YouTube star, and I
Mhm.
absolutely love her work. She is great. When I talked about the juggling different cultures, she brings so much to light, and she does it through humor. Um, and Mindy Kaling, I know I saw her when she came to Austin, and it was amazing. I got a selfie with her, but again, another great woman. Kind of naming those women, and even for myself, it's kind of how do I play that role of being a role model. Again, empowering other women that look like me to get out there, whatever it is. If you're in entertainment or want to go be an entrepreneur or even an artist, putting yourself out there just inspires people that you didn't even think of. And, I think that's the biggest barrier that I have seen is just there's not many female role models out there that are South Asian.
One last lighter question. What is your go coffee
Mhm.
shop? Knowing you're very busy, I'm assuming you have one.
Basically, I live off espresso. I was one of the mocha latte people for a long time, and then right before I started my business, I switched to black coffee, and it just seemed to kind of get more concentrated as time went on of just how much caffeine and how much coffee I needed to drink. So yeah, I have multiple shots of espresso per day. I now have an espresso machine at home, which has made it even more impossible to avoid it. So I have different flavors and I love it. And if I want something more creamy, I've been really falling in love with oat milk. I feel that
Mm.
it has more body than almond milk. Almond milk is just so watery. It doesn't really help the coffee. Um, okay, that's just my opinion, but that's my go-to
I'm the
drink.
same way. I'm the same way. I also just learned oat milk is the most environmentally conscious uh, choice, like alternative milk choice you can make now, which made me love it even more.
Yeah, exactly.
Final question, and it's kind of an
Mhm.
open to you one. If you could ask yourself a question, or if you have an area we haven't touched on, what would the question be and what is the answer?
I think the one question that I continually ask myself, we'll go with that, is
Mhm.
the greatest self-love and how to achieve and spread that love from myself to others. And I know that this was my really big question in Nepal that I was just focused on. How do you love your hands? How do you love, the way your face looks in the morning, to how your different tastes and your likes and your dislikes, and how do you love all that? So I think that's the one thing I always ask myself, because I've realized that I improve and I get better at loving others through loving myself. And I've had more compassion and just a lot more deeper empathy for what people are going through, and just where we are, which has really, of course, impacted my work and the way that we build our approaches. But it all starts with yourself. And so I think yeah, that's the biggest question I would ask myself, and my answer is simply, take the time to embrace all the little things. I think so often we get told how to feel about ourselves. We don't have the opportunity to embrace all of our light and darkness. Maybe I don't like anchovies, and maybe I, don't like ska, and that's fine. Like whatever it is, kind of just embracing who you are and owning it. So yeah, I would say, like, that's the biggest thing that I would ask, and ask of others too. How do you love yourself, and
Mhm.
can you love yourself deeply? What does that look like?
Definitely. Well, those are all questions. Thank you so much for talking to
Yeah.
me.